Hey folks, so I've seen some posts coming through my feed recently pointing out a very important thing, and that is if you find yourself saying, well, I do this, I was taught to do things this way, this is the way I was raised, then you should pause for a moment and question that because you may be repeating a very toxic behavior. And I agree with that. I agree with that. And I want to add to it. So here we go with the story time. So when I was a dysphoric, confused teenager, I was on the streets for off and on for a couple years. And I think I was 16 or 17 years old, and it was Christmas Day. And I was on Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley, California. A bunch of us homeless people were hanging out in front of a bank that was closed on a street that was pretty empty with very little traffic, all, just being us. And a little compact car pulled up to the curb right in front of us, stopped. Two women jumped out of the car with bags full of gifts, wrapped gifts. They got out and they handed out all these gifts. They said Merry Christmas. They didn't introduce themselves, they didn't wait for thanks. They just handed out gifts and left. They just did it. Random act of kindness. Like, obviously, it was planned. They had it all out. Right. So we're sitting there, we're opening these presents, and pretty much most of it's like socks or gloves. And in some situations, people are like, oh, I already have gloves, but I need a pair of socks. Will you trade with me? That sort of thing. Everyone was really happy about it. The thing that struck me about it was that these people weren't looking for thanks. They weren't looking for gratitude. They weren't looking for acknowledgement. They were simply doing it because it made a difference. And that had a huge impact on me. So when my kids were young, I'd say my youngest was probably about 3 and my oldest was then 9. I had the money that year to do something extra, and I went out and I bought a whole bunch of hats and gloves and socks and scarves, things that were relatively inexpensive individually, but altogether, I did spend a chunk of money on them. And then we sat down, the three of us, me and my two kids, and we wrapped all the presents. And while we were wrapping the presents individually, I told them the story of what happened to me when I was a kid and how it was so important that nobody was forgotten because everybody matters. And then they went with me and we drove back out to the same place that I had been homeless, and we parked and we walked around town and we just handed out gifts. Anybody that clearly looked like they were homeless or down on their luck, we just walked up to them and handed them a gift. Said, "Merry Christmas, you matter," and walked away. And it made such a huge impact on my children. Now, maybe not everybody that got a gift from us that day was impacted by it, but a lot of people, I'm sure, were for the same reasons and the same ways that I was when I was homeless. More importantly, what it taught my children was to see the humanity in every single person, regardless of their shape, size, color, or otherwise appearance. It taught them that everyone matters and no one should be left behind. Now, my kids are both adults. And one of the things that they have the biggest problem with is when they're working and they find out their boss is a classist jerk. They really have a hard time keeping that job because they look at everybody so incredibly compassionately and recognize the humanity in all people. It just makes them so angry when they have to deal with somebody else who's trying to enforce intolerance through their employer practices.